Hey neighbors, Kevin here with the etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Airlift's load controller compressor system here on our 2015 Ram 1500. So if you're like our neighbor and you already have air springs installed or you're getting them installed now, it is a great time to upgrade your system and add on a compressor. Now our neighbor today works in the construction industry, so he is hauling a lot of different loads around as he goes from job site to job site. And there's not always electric there for you to plug in a standard compressor, so having the ability to run that off of your vehicle's battery and adjust your PSI level to exactly what you need is going to be a game changer. Now this air compressor is going to come with an analog display, so that's this little gauge we have up on our dash. Now typically I would recommend a system that's going to come with a wireless remote or Bluetooth ability through an app, just because it's a whole lot easier, and to be honest, I'm always going to have my phone with me. I'd like to be able to see exactly what my PSI is at and be able to pick up any error codes that might pass through if I do have an issue, and then just using my phone is just kind of second nature. But what comes with that is a lot of headache when it comes to pairing to the system itself. So a lot of times if you lose power for a little bit, then you got to go through the whole repairing process, and it can be a bit of a hassle. Even just last week I was doing a system that actually had a remote with it, and it just did not want to pair. We had to keep cutting power, re-adding power back on, and then trying to pair again just to make sure that it would fully go through. And it just took a little bit longer than we would really want. So if you're someone who doesn't want to deal with the headache of all that added technology, then an analog gauge like our system came with today is going to be the right fit for you. So if you look at our gauge, it ranges from 0 up to 100 PSI. It's going to have 3 buttons on it, and there will also be a backlight once we have our vehicle on, so that way you can actually see it, especially if it's dark out. So the way this would function is you would air both bags up using this upper button, and then the 2 lower buttons you'd want to press at the same time to lower the PSI, because this is a single path setup. Now if you had a dual path compressor that went with this gauge, then you'd be able to adjust those 2 separately. As far as installation goes, there really isn't too much extra that you're going to need for this compressor. We did end up using probably a good 10 feet of 10 gauge wire just to run from our gauge wiring into our engine compartment, so that we could make it over to the fuse panel, so that we could tie this into the ignition, so that way the compressor is not going to just run on its own at any time. It's only going to be able to work when we have the ignition on. Now, it can be a little bit tricky running all of your wiring and your air line from the compressor, which we typically are going to mount back at the passenger side frame rail. So if you don't want to do that yourself, or maybe it's just out of your realm, then use our dealer locator, which will allow you to type in your zip code and find a shop within that zip code to help get this installed correctly. Now, if you have a 2015 Ram 1500 and you are wanting to do this yourself, please stick around. We're about to show you how we did it. So I've decided this is going to be where I want to mount my compressor. It's going to give us plenty of protection. We've also got a running board here that's going to help protect it, so nothing's flinging up and hitting it. The little gasket thing that they have on here is a little bit thick, so it's harder to get a paint marker in there to mark all of our spots, and a pencil's not really going to show on this frame. So I've clamped it up, and now I'm going to use my punch and just try to get right in the center so we can drill out some holes. We don't want to use the self-tappers right away out of the box into the frame, because you're going to end up just chewing up that bit and not actually getting through. Hit it in each of our holes here. And now we can remove it. I can kind of also see the circle from the little bushing or gasket thing they have on here, but we can also see our holes. We got one there, one here, and right above it. So I'm going to actually hit those again, give them a little bit more of an indentation, and then we can start drilling. All right, just to give you a little reference here, I'm going to start with a 1/8 inch bit, and we're going to work our way up larger until we get closer to what our self-tapper is. So I'll go from this and then a 5/32, and then I'll run my self-tapper through. That way it still has a little bit it'll chew up, but it's not going to ruin the screw going through the frame. Now I'm going to use my self-tapper. I've got a 10mm socket on my impact here. We'll push this through. And you want to be real careful. You don't want to go too hard with this. I would get it most of the way down and then stop and do it by hand. It's very easy to snap off a self-tapper in the frame rail. Now with our compressor mounted, our next step is going to be routing our air lines as well as an air line for our air filter right here. There's going to be another fitting on the back side of your compressor right here, and that's what's going to run to this little filter. This needs to stay up somewhere where it's not going to get wet or have anything really hit it. So if we look up behind the wheel well and go straight up, there's a hat channel for the bed way up there, and it's nice and protected. So I think I'm going to drill out the hole that is already in that, just a little bit larger. I'm going to try to do a 1/4 inch drill bit because we need to make sure that we can pop in this little Christmas tree fitting here, but we don't want it so large that now this has nothing to bite onto. So 1/4 inch is just slightly larger than the head right there, so it should give me enough leeway to push it in, have it latch, and not be loose on us at all. And here's that little hole I was talking about in the hat channel. So I'm going to enlarge that just enough so we can pop in our filter. So I stepped this up a little bit larger. We did go up to a 3/8 bit just because this Christmas tree fitting is pretty stiff. Doesn't really have enough flexibility to really pop in otherwise. So we can. Now you have 2 sets of airline tubing. The smaller one, it's about 4 foot long, and it's a lot more flexible. It's going to be going to our filter. So we're going to make sure that we're getting this over each barb on our compressor. So it's nice and secure. And now we can route this up. I think I'm going to go over the frame. Just like that. And then we can loop it back here. With all the excess, I will end up just zip tying that up out of the way. What we can do is, might loop it on the compressor side, honestly, just to keep it really tucked up away from everything. So maybe we'll pull that back a bit. If you are doing that, what I like to do is just wind it up into a loop. I'm going to bring a little bit more back, and then we can press on to our filter. There we go. Now I'll grab some zip ties. They give you a good handful of them, but honestly you might want to pick up a few more just in case, because typically you'll have to use a bunch trying to just tuck away the airline tube once it's running out to the air springs. But all this excess I'm going to have right up here. It's going to sit on top of our compressor a bit, but I don't want it touching the compressor because that can get hot. So I'm going to also look, see if we got another spot. There's a hole in the frame. I'm going to run a zip tie through that and then have that hold up our bundle. So for our electric, we have a harness that's going to have a 10 gauge wire that's going to be on one end, and then the other end's going to have all of our relays and other connections that we're going to make to our analog display. To power up our compressor, we are going to have to cut off this connector right here. They got a spade terminal on there. So we're going to pop that off, and then we'll strip back our casing because we're going to be using a heat shrink butt connector. Slide on our heat shrink butt connector. We'll crimp that down. Give it a little tug, make sure it's not loose, and then we'll do the same thing with our other wire for our harness. And then we can crimp it down. Give that let it tug as well. And then we can come back with a heat gun and shrink down that to protect our wiring. Now for the negative, we are going to ground that using one of our mounting bolts. So I'm going to back this back off. And since it has a self-tapper, it's going to want to fight that last little bit. And we can slip it behind so that it's touching the frame, and then pass our screw back through. Throughout the airline, I came up over our frame rail right here. In various spots, any hole I can kind of find where I can zip tie it to, I've been doing that as well. I'll probably add one more over here too. I feel like that might be a little bit too loose. But I come over here, I've got a T right here which runs backwards to another T which goes between the two bags and then out to that manual fill port. And then this other line right here is going to run up to inside the cab for where our display is going to be. But I can show you this a little bit better. I have my T going over the frame rail, coming down right through here, going up to our passenger side airbag. Here's the T running down the frame rail. I have it come over to this T right here, which runs out to that manual fill. And I just follow the frame rail the whole way until I get back here. I have not cut a hole for our fill port yet. I just have it sitting here in this little hole we got sitting at the bottom of our bumper. But right here is going to be where I'm going to drill through and mount that. Now for the other one, coming off that T I just ran across, I try to keep it above the frame here, that's cross beam. That way it's staying away from our exhaust. So it's hidden up here, it comes down, and then so I could also stay away from our coil spring, I pushed it to the, towards the front and then have it right here going towards our driver's side airbag. Now for running up to the cab, we didn't have too many cross beams that were really in a good spot, so I went with this one which holds up our gas tank. I went right over that and came over to our frame rail, and I'm right on top of it. So there weren't too many good cross beams to attach to get up to the cab. So what I did was I stayed back here with this one that is holding up our gas tank. I ran it across, and once I get over to here, I'm still above the frame rail. I come over, and at this body mount, I zip tied it because I have two holes right here so I can help hold that up. Came over a little bit further and zip tied it to this little spot. If you find any little brackets or anything where there's a hole so you can easily slip a zip tie through, I'd definitely recommend popping one in. But we keep tracing that along, and you can also see we have our electrical, which also came over using that same beam that goes across, but a little bit further up. And that's coming all down over to this point right here, and then we have our emergency brake line. So I've zip tied to that. I got it up to this grommet right here. And this is right in the threshold for our driver's door, so that's going to allow us to come right up. We can sneak it in behind all of the trim pieces in that quarter panel. That way we can get it up into the dash so we can connect to our monitor. So up in our cab, there's this one solid trim piece that goes right down here. If you start at the end of it towards the back of the seat, you just pull straight up. It'll pop right out of these white little clips here. And then there'll be some clips right here. If you just pull straight out, it'll pop right out for you. Honestly, it came out way easier than most panels that I've ever had to pull. And then once we see that, we can get to this grommet right here. So I lifted up on this cable. I drilled out a 3/8 hole, and then I took my grinding bit and tried to grind out the lip of this a little bit, so that way our airline isn't coming in and then making a 90-degree turn. It's just going to kind of have a little bit of an angle so that it's not going to get kinked or smashed here. So I'm going to follow this up, and I've already popped out my little side panel here. This guy just pops kind of straight out from the vehicle. So I can route all this up because I'm going to mount my gauge right here because there really isn't a great spot anywhere else, just because some of these other panels where we could mount it it would be right in the way of your knee, or it's going to be a panel that we can't really mount to because there's something else behind it that you'd have to get to eventually and wouldn't want to have to pull the whole display just to do so. So at this point we can route up behind our framework over here. I'm going to pop it behind here to have that help protect it. Working our way up, just fishing it through. I think for this part I am going to have to go up to right here, and then once we get it here we can pull it around and kind of just push up on our plastic here, because there is a bit of a gap between this piece and then our actual dash piece. So it should be enough for me to get that line out, and then we can run it through the back of our mount and into our display. So after playing with this a little bit, I did have to move it. I was trying to get all the way up behind all the metal, but I did have to pop out right here in the middle, and then I came up and tucked it in to that space that's between our dash and this quarter panel right here. I've come up and I've left excess because I want to be able to kind of loop that back and not have it be super tight. We want to make sure that we're not kinking it, because if we go way too tight, make too tight of a 90 there, it's going to end up kinking the line and then it's not going to work right. Now we can work with our gauge back. So I'm going to slot our wire through. I'm going to do it on my right side. If I can get all the wires to cooperate. Before I get too close, I'm also going to slot that airline through so that we can connect to our barbed fitting here. Push that in. Now we'll probably need a little bit extra while we're doing this, just to kind of get it to where we can actually work with it. And we'll want to make sure that we get this all the way down on it. Bring this up. Make sure it's sitting correctly in here. And then route our line back. And before I get any further, we can drill down the mount as well. All right, now to make sure I got this exactly where I want it, I've got my gauge sitting right above it. And this looks like we got enough room to get it in there and still be able to turn it up and down. So I'm going to hold my mount down. Now they don't give you self-tapping screws like I'm going to use, but I also went ahead and painted the top of it with a black paint marker, and I've had that drying this whole time. So that way I can cut through and have this match up. Now there is a vent right here, but if you feel in from the side, the vent is probably an inch down from the dash. So I've got plenty of room here. I don't need to worry about accidentally drilling into anything. On one side of the bracket, there's going to be a space for a nut to drop into. On the other side, you're going to have your screw. It's going to be a Phillips head, and it's black. We'll pop this onto our base. If you're having issues with that falling out, since it's such a tight clearance here, I'm actually just going to take a little piece of painter's tape and put it over it. All right, painter's tape should hold that in place. Now I can position the gauge. Then we can pop in our screw. Still a bit of a tight clearance here, so trying to fight me. All right, for our next part, we're going to have 3 of these purple spade connectors. You'll see it is a female sided, and these are going to connect up to the male side on our harness. So for the first one here, we're going to do red and green, and I'm going to twist those 2 together. We'll pop on our spade terminal, and then crimp it down. tug, make sure it's not loose. And then white and black are going to be separate, so we'll put those on their own. Now with this, we're going to do black to black. Making sure that that fully compresses in there. We'll do white to gray. And then red and green over to our pink wire here. Now we also have this part right here. On the back side of it, it's going to have a C on one of the prongs, and on the other it's going to have an NC. C is going to have our black wire, and then NC is going to be our gray wire. And the other side of this is going to be routed into our airline. So the airline that I have hidden behind the dash, I'm going to stick this up in there. I'm going to press that in, so that way this is hidden because this needs to be inside the cab, and from where we came into the cab and to where our gauge is, there's honestly not too many great spots, so hiding behind the dash is going to be the best bet so that we're also still near our wire harness. All right, for this pink 10 gauge wire, we are going to strip back the casing, twist it up a bit, cut off a little bit. I want a little bit too much casing for what I would like. We'll take the other heat shrink butt connector in our kit, and then we'll crimp that on. And I've already started running the wire that's going to run over to our fuse. And that's this guy right here, so I'm going to cut him off as well. Give a little bit extra just in case we need some slack. Twist that up as well, and I'm going to pop that into our butt connector. Crimp that down. And now for the other side of this, I ran it through that same grommet we ran through earlier with our other wiring in our airline. So that way I've got everything going through one spot. And if we go up to the engine compartment, there's a space right under there where that comes out. The wheel well liner meets right there. So I just ran it right up the wheel well, kind of tucked it in with this wiring, ran behind the battery, and now I have it over here because the fuse that we're going to be using is right here. And we've checked it, made sure that it only works when the ignition is on. So from there, we can strip back the casing, and we'll cut off a little bit of our casing. This will get a heat shrink butt connector. Down. Now there's also a fuse holder that we're going to put in right here too. This comes with your kit. And I'm going to strip back the casing on both sides because one side is going to go into that butt connector, the other one is going to go into a spade terminal. And on this side we got our spade terminal. We're going to be using a female sided one. All nice and tight. And then we'll crimp it down. Give it a little tug. Now it's good to go. Now we can pull out our fuse. So we need to tap into a 15 amp fuse. This one ended up being a clearance light, so we don't have to worry about it having any kind of issues. If anything did blow on this, we wouldn't be out of luck. So with this, in your kit, you're going to find a couple different fuse taps. We're going to be, since it's this type of fuse has a smaller little prong on it, we're going to be using this guy, and we'll pop it right over one of the prongs. It's going to sit in just like that. We'll put it back in place. Oh, actually, we're going to have to move it over the other prong just because of the layout of this. If you look really, really close, you can see there's an extra space for a fuse tab to go with it. You just got to make sure you're on the right prong. Pop it back in. And now the top is a male spade terminal. So with our fuse holder, we can plug right into it. And then actually, I think I might try to tuck my wire just a bit more under here before connecting to it. Make sure we can still close our box. Looks like it is going to fight us. So if you want to do it perfect, you can make a little notch in your box. Or if you don't care, you can just leave it open like that. A lot of times if you kind of have it just a little bit in there, it'll be held in place and then the hood won't allow it to open. Now that I've got this shrunk down and I've got a notch, so I cut a little notch with my oscillating saw right here in the bottom and then right here in the top as well so that I can get this to sit nice. Slot back in our lid. Make sure our wire's in the correct. So now I've got that heat shrink shrunk down and I've kind of bent my spade terminal just a tiny bit so that way this isn't sitting so high up that the lid is catching it. And I notched out a little section in the bottom of our tray here and then a little bit out of the lid. So that way when we set this down, we can lock it in place and have no issues. Right. The next step would be to put in our fuse into our fuse holder, but I'm gonna hold off on that. I'm gonna make sure that everything's all cleaned up and I've got all my wire tucked away, all my panels back in, and then we can test it out. Last wire that I need to hook up on the inside here before I tuck everything up out of the way and zip tie it is the ground. Now there's a factory ground right here, so I'm just gonna put it right to that because it already comes with a ring terminal hooked onto it, so it's gonna be nice and easy. Now that I've buttoned everything up inside, we can finally put in our fuse and test out our compressor. Now that we've got that sitting there, we are also going to push it up to 50 psi with our compressor, and then we will go and spray every single one of our connection points. To find a leak, all you're going to need is some soapy water, and all you'll do is go to every connection point and just spray all over them and see if you get any big air bubbles coming out. If you start seeing air bubbles, you know you got an issue and you'll need to correct it. Now, we'll do this to each one. I'm not going to waste your time just because we have so many T's here that we have to spray, so just repeat that process at each connection. Now that we have our air lines ran from the air springs over to our compressor and then also a manual fill port, which I hid right up here in our bumper, that'll do it for our installation of the air springs. Now that we've tested and there's no leaks, and we can also kind of confirm that with our gauge right here, because if you have a leak, you're going to start seeing it drop down in PSI. But all that being said, since we're all good, I'm going to press both buttons here. Since we don't have a dual path, we're going to be dropping them both at the same time, and that's just going to let that air out. And we're going to drop it down to 5 PSI. Right there. Now with our airbags back down to 5 PSI, we can ride around without having them affect our unloaded ride quality, but they're not so low that they could potentially damage the bag. So with all that said, that'll do it for the install for our air compressor. Well, I think that does it for today's look at and installation of the Airlift load controller compressor system here on our 2015 Ram 1500. My name's Kevin, and if this video wasn't helpful enough for you, or you're still looking for the right air compressor for your Ram 1500, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.